In the current context, we have both globalization, financialization, and urbanization. When it comes to urbanization, there are two aspects to that subject. One of them is, yes, the growth of cities, the growth of slums, the stuff that happens in the cities. But there is also something that happens in the shadow, if you want, of the city, which are the variety of developments in rural areas, in non-urbanized areas, that are literally expelling people from those areas. As globalization expands, what you see is that a growing number of cities gets added because global firms, global markets, articulated with more and more countries across the world. So it's almost an organically produced systemic demand for global cities. Most cities are not global cities, and that's becoming a research question. In many ways, the more and more we see that more and more national economic development policy is actually a sort of global city policy and Silicon Valley policy, the privileging of particular kinds of economic spaces to the neglect of the rest. We see misalignments and new alignments among the question of cities and the national territories within which they function. This is a huge subject, and I'm sure that in our conference in Budapest we will address a lot of very different aspects of this larger question. I think it matters to recognize that the powerless do get to make history. And I have in my research a kind of an in-between zone that I like to point out to. That is that very often the powerless make history, but they make it without getting empowered. And because they do not become empowered, their making of that history is easily rendered invisible. And that, I think, means, that also explains, I think, why we so often don't understand why a change has occurred. So we need to understand, how are economies made? Look at the slums we admire, the good slums, so to say. They have made whole sub-economies. They have built their housing, they have made their economies, they have built their schooling and their learning, and they make their art. In the upcoming conference in Budapest, the Global Development Network, I've been asked to address the issue of the city, urbanization in the context of development, and I'm interested in the challenges of development, the questions, the inputs. Can we process that in an urbanized way almost, the city as urbanizing development, so that it comes out with civic features, with capacities to transform conflicts and hatreds into something positive.